Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk about the latest episode of HBO Max's The Last of Us. It was called Kin. As it starts, we find ourselves 3 months later from where we left off. And I was like, well, shit, like what happened in those 3 months? That's a long time to go in a show like this where so much happens on a daily basis. Like I was a little confused by why they would jump 3 whole months. Anyway, it's 3 months from where we left off before, and Joel and Ellie have kind of taken an old couple hostage in a cabin in the snowy woods, trying to get info about Tommy and the fireflies. The couple doesn't have any info on that, but they're told by them not to keep going in the direction they're going because it would eventually require them to cross a river, and across the river lies only death, they say. But they, of course, head west anyway. After a while, they make camp and talk about what they'll do in a world with a cure, assuming one is able to be found from Ellie's blood. And Joel says he'd run a sheep ranch, while Ellie says she'd want to go to space, which is interesting because in the second game, there's a whole scene related to that. But anyway, she also tells him about trying to cure Sam with her blood and how she failed. And Joel tells her it's more complicated than that and not to think anything of it. As they're making their way further west the next morning, they are suddenly surrounded by a bunch of folks on horseback who test them for infection by means of an infection sniffing dog. And they both pass, even though it was tense for a second because they didn't know if the dog would smell the infection on Ellie. But after that, they're taken on horseback to a town that's populated by hundreds of people who are apparently all not infected. And one of the residents is Tommy. It would seem that all the dead bodies being left near the river that made the old couple think that only death was beyond the river were left by people of this town when they went on patrol. It turns out that this community was started 7 years ago and that they have power because they draw from the nearby dam. Tommy apparently is married, and when his wife Maria takes Ellie to a house that they can stay at, Tommy and Joel catch up. When Tommy asks Joel how Tess is, he lies and says she's okay. He also lies as to why he's there looking for the fireflies. It turns out that Tommy's wife is pregnant and he doesn't want to go with Joel to Colorado to find the fireflies, which Joel was hoping he would do. When Joel is then less than enthusiastic about Tommy becoming a dad, they kind of have words, and Joel says he and Ellie will grab some supplies and be out of their hair in the morning. Immediately after this, Joel seems to have some kind of angina attack in the street, which is actually the second one he's had in this episode. And then he sees a girl that for a second he almost thinks is Sarah. After Ellie has a shower and gets new clothes, Maria gives her a haircut. After Ellie notices a chalkboard on the mantle in Tommy and Maria's house, which lists the birth and death dates of 2 children, one of whom is Sarah, Ellie assumes they were both Tommy's wives and offers condolences on the loss of her children, at which point she's told that only one was her child and that Sarah was Joel's, which of course she didn't know, but which she says explains him a little bit. And then she and Maria have a conversation about how Maria is concerned that Ellie is with Joel because she doesn't know everything there is to know about him. But Ellie shrugs it off. And then Maria takes her to see a movie. It was a movie with Richard Dreyfuss. I haven't figured out which movie, and it's kind of bugging me. So if anybody knows, let me know. Tommy and Joel have another conversation in private, and Joel explains about Ellie being immune and about his journey with her up to this point. Joel tearfully explains how he feels like he's lost his grip on the part of himself that used to enable him to survive in this world because Ellie had to save his life when he couldn't hear that guy coming when they first got to the city where they met Sam and Henry, and how he couldn't save Ellie from Sam and that it was Henry who did, and that he wants Tommy to take Ellie to Colorado because he doesn't think he can do it and that he'll end up getting her killed. He goes to tell Ellie this, but she already overheard him talking with Tommy, and she isn't taking it well. When she asks him if he gives a shit about her or not, he says, of course he does. And when she tells him that she's not her, meaning Sarah, and that she is sorry for the loss of her, he tells her to stop talking about it. And when she says she's lost people too, he says, you have no idea what loss is, at which point she gets really upset and she says that everybody she's ever cared for has either died or ditched her except for him, and that she'll just be more scared if she has to go with someone else. But he just says they're parting ways and that's it. After which he has a flashback to a Christmas past with his daughter. The next morning, he decides to take her himself if she'd rather go with him, even though he thinks she'd be better off with Tommy, and she opts to go with Joel, who borrows his brother's rifle, seeing as his sister in law took his, and they go off on a horse that Tommy gives them. And over the course of the next 5 days, Joel teaches Ellie to shoot the rifle and explains to her about football. They come upon a seemingly abandoned college, and as they're going through it, Joel explains that really, he always wanted to be a singer, not a sheep rancher. While walking through the campus, they see a firefly symbol painted on a sign. After following the sign to one of the buildings on campus, they seem to find indications that the fireflies who were there had moved on. But then they hear a noise that makes them think someone's there, but it turns out that it was just a pair of monkeys who must have been on campus in a lab somewhere before the infection and then got out. Soon they realize that there are people present as well, though, and they go out the back to try to get to their horse unseen. They end up getting attacked by a guy, and Joel kills him by snapping his neck, but not before getting stabbed in the gut. They then manage to escape on the horse, and by so doing, avoid being jumped by a bunch of other people that the one guy was with. But shortly thereafter, Joel collapses off the horse from his wound. Ellie kind of freaks out and tries to get him to regain consciousness by saying that she can't continue without him, and that's where the episode ended. So I really liked this episode. I thought it was very powerful because it yet again demonstrates that these two people are really beginning to care about each other. And it really demonstrates how Joel has, really started to think of Ellie as his daughter, even though getting close to her petrifies him because he's afraid to lose her the way he lost Sarah. And the stakes are kind of the same for Ellie because, as she says, she's lost everyone she's ever cared about one way or another. So that really became apparent in this episode more so than ever. And Pedro Pascal did an amazing job of, portraying a guy who is just petrified of having to experience great loss again. But, just as in the game, we see him persevere through it and decide to stick with Ellie anyway and see it through. We get to see a lot of scenes in the snowy wilderness, and I thought that was cool. It looked gorgeous. And, finally seeing a place in the world where hundreds of people are thriving and living outside of the control of Fedra was really, really cool. I'd be lying if I said I didn't wish that there were more interactions with the infected because they've used them so little so far that it's almost like they don't exist. And I mean, last week we got that huge, stampede of them, and that was cool and everything. But like, I don't know, I think seeing more of the infected would, drive home even more the point about how screwed up the world is. And, because it's just horrific to see that these people used to be human and now they're not. And I think we're sort of missing that reminder, because they talk about it more than they show it. And I don't think that's good. I mean, they skipped 3 whole months. Are we supposed to believe there was no, they didn't have any interactions with infected people for 3 months? I mean, they are like out in the wilderness and everything at this point, but like they weren't, I don't think, for that whole 3 months. So I don't know. I wouldn't want them to replace the serious human connection parts of the episode that we had with zombie encounters, infected encounters, action sequences. But I don't know why they had to show us the scene where they interrogate the old couple, for example. Like, why didn't they, do something with that time to show some of the infected? And, the campfire scene was cool, but like, I don't know, I think they could have used some of that time, if not all of it, to show some kind of conflict with the infected. I mean, there are several episodes left, so I suppose we'll see some more of that, but I don't know. I think they've been kind of light on it. And it's not just because I need the action because I'm bored or whatever. It's just because it's part of the story, what's happened to people. And I don't think they're showing enough of it. But anyway, I really, really like the show. This was a really good episode, in the human drama aspect. I'm really digging how they're making the relationship work so well between Ellie and Joel and, the actors themselves, because that was a core part of the game and what made the game so great. And so they're able to translate it to the show. And I don't think that was necessarily an easy feat, but they've managed it. So I'm happy about that. But anyway, that's really it. I'm gonna get out of here for now. I'll be back to review the next episode once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.